Hey guys, it's Sam for Digital Meat in collaboration with RizomLab. In this RizomUV tutorial, we're going to look at the different methods for selecting seams and making cuts. So let's get started. First of all, I'm going to need an object inside RizomUV. So I'm just going to export a model from Cinema 4D using the RizomUV bridge. So I'm going to export this duck here. So with that selected, I'm going to click on my shortcut to the Rizom bridge. That should automatically open up RizomUV, and here we've got our duck. You can see it in the 3D view here and in the UV view, and as you can see, it's not been flattened, it hasn't got any UVs. Okay, so now we can start talking about cuts. To begin, we're going to need to be able to select the edges we want to cut. So we're going to need our select tool enabled. This can be found in the edit mode panel, and it's at the top here. It's already selected for me. Next, I'm going to select edges. You have a choice between vertex, edges, polygons, and islands. So I'm going to choose edges. This is typically how our seams are selected before cutting. This is not true of all cases, but we'll get back to that later. Next, we have our methods of selection. We have the rectangle area tool, which is already selected here, and you can make selections by a simple click and drag. Anything inside of that gets selected. Next is the lasso mode, and that can be clicked and dragged, and then you can basically draw out a path. Anything inside of this path is selected. Next we have the polyline mode, and you actually click to create points, and like this, go back to the beginning, and anything inside of that is selected. You can also actually create points like this, and you don't have to return to the beginning, you can just double click. And lastly on our list we have the circle mode. Simple click and drag creates this circle, and anything encompassed inside of it is selected. I'm going to go back to the rectangle mode because that's my preference. On another note, you'll notice that when I make a drag selection like this, and then flip round to the other side of the model, you can see that only the visible edges were selected. Well, if you did want to select through the object and include the edges that can't be seen, this can be achieved by going into wireframe view and then making your selection. So we've got wireframe view up here. So let's go into that. And it's actually quite difficult to see because the background is black. So I'm going to go into edit, preferences dialog, and it says 3D background part, and it's set to black, and I'm actually going to change this to a grey, something like this, and OK that. There we go. I think that may be a bit too light. There we go. OK, that's a little better. So now we're in wireframe view, and I can see my duck. I'm going to click drag like this, and as you can see that it's selected all of the edges on the other side there. Let's get back to wireframe shaded view. Okay, so a single click selects one edge, and a double click selects a loop. So if I double click an edge there, you can see that it's been looped. If I do it on its beak, it should go all the way around, and we've got a nice edge loop there. If you'd like to see the part of your selection that is being occluded by our object, we can use the see-through selection mode. So as you can see, I can see this part of the loop on the beak of the duck, but I can't see this stuff here. And if I did want to, I can click on this, and it gives you kind of like a lightened preview of that loop through the duck's, is it bill or beak? Yeah, it must be bill. Okay, so yeah, there it is toggling on and off. Okay, back to loops. We now have the ability to control our loop selections and their reach. You'll notice on the right hand side here, we have a bunch of parameter tabs. These tabs change dynamically based on the mode we're in. So I'll demonstrate that quickly by flipping over to polygon mode. Keep an eye on the menus on the left, on the right there. If I click it, you'll see that they've changed. And if I go back to edge, they've changed again. The tab that we're interested in at the moment is the edge loop parameters. So I'm actually going to go there and click on the name there, and it unfolds the tab. Let's start with edge count limit. So we can enable edge count limit by clicking the enable button. When this is enabled, we can limit the reach of our loop selection. So I'm going to set the edge count limit to something low like 3. So let's change this value to 3. And if I were to attempt to make an edge loop now, it will be restricted. So I'm just going to choose this here. And as you can see, it's been limited to 3 edges either side of my selected edge. Let's do it here as well. So there you go. There was my selected edge, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And obviously if I change this to a larger value, it would then be a larger value when I double click. Also in the edge loop parameters, we have angle limit. So let's disable the edge count limit and enable angle limit. The angle limit parameter allows us to restrict loop selections based on an angle threshold between edges. For example, in this case, at an angle of 180, which is already in there, loop selection will work as normal. So in fact, I'm just going to disable this for a moment, and if I double click on a loop on the duck there, you can see that that's how it works normally, and with it enabled at 180 degrees, it's exactly the same. But if we drop the angle limit to 35 degrees, let's try that, and try and make the same selection again, you can see that the selection has been limited based on the angle of this corner. It was much too severe and went over this value, and so it's been restricted. Also in the edge loop parameters, we have another button called geometric here. To understand this button, we're going to have to understand what a complex pole is. So let me find an example of a regular pole, which are all over this model, to be honest. Okay, so here's an example of a regular pole. It's a vertex point with 4 connecting edges. So we've got 1, 2 here, 3, 4. This makes edge flow direction obvious, and if we double click on any of these edges, a loop can be defined easily. By contrast, a complex pole is a vertex point with 5 or more connecting edges. This makes edge flow less obvious. So if I look at my model here and I go up here, you can see that this is a complex pole. It's a vertex point, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges all connected to the same vertex point. Let's try and create a loop through this complex pole and see what happens. As you can see, because the edge flow isn't immediately obvious, the loop has been stopped at the complex pole. If we look here, we can see that possible routes are up here or up here. By clicking this geometric button, we can force loop selections through a complex pole. Its route is determined by the path with the straightest angle. So we've got that turned on, so let's try this again. And as you can see, it's been forced through that pole now. Now you're probably wondering why this is looped in this direction. It's because this has been forced through the pole. It's gone around the beak here, got to this one, and it's been forced through the pole and then gone around the back of the head back to its destination. So let's try going through this complex pole another way and see what happens. We didn't, not like that. There you go. So there we go. It's been forced through that complex pole, and that's what that geometric button does. And with it off, you can see it's being stopped at that pole. With it on, forced through. Okay, now onto the path selection. To make a path selection, I can click an edge. So let's just find an arbitrary edge here. And then if I hold Control and Shift, I get this selection preview, like so. Now you may be saying, hey, it's not working for me. And there's a very good reason why this might be the case. As a Cinema 4D user, I want to keep my experience in RizomUV as close to my experience in Cinema 4D as possible. This can be achieved by going to Edit at the top here, and then down to Keyboard Mouse Customizer. Here you'll find control presets for most major 3D programs, plus we have the option to customize the controls to suit our needs ourselves. As default, the RizomUV option is enabled up here. Anyway, let's go back and look to the right of our screen. There is a tab here called Help and Select. If it's not already folded down, and it's like this, fold it. Once it's been twirled down, we can see all the mouse and key commands for the preset we've selected. So if you have one of the other presets like RizomUV, or you're a Maya user or something like that, this tab will help display different mouse and key combinations. If I scroll down to the bottom here, you'll see that preview shorted path, which is what I was doing. I selected an edge and then Control Shift, and you can see it says, well, Shift Control in this case, but same thing. If I go back to the keyboard mouse customizer and choose RizomUV, and then say Save and Close, you can see at the bottom here now, it's just Shift. So that's just something to keep note. If I'm pressing something and it's not the same for you, you might have a different preset. So I'm just going to go back here and change it back to C4D, save and close, and we're back to what we had. On another note concerning navigation control in RizomUV, we can change how the orbit works in the viewport. If we go to Edit and Preferences dialog, under Orbit mode here, we have a few options. By default, RizomUV is set to view centered. This means that the orbit will always use the center of the viewport as its rotational pivot. I'm going to change this to mouse centered. This means the viewport will rotate around the mouse pointer position, which is what I prefer. Okay, let's get back to our path selection. Like I was saying, I can make a path selection by clicking an edge and then holding Control Shift, and I get our preview, and then click again to confirm the path, and now it's been selected. This method always chooses the shortest path to get from your initial edge selection to your destination, but we have the option to control this. If I select our Protect tool here, and actually let's get rid of our selection first and go to the Protect tool, and then I can start painting the duck's wing. So I'm just going to come down here. You can see the controls for the Protect tool here. Its value set to 1. I'm just going to bring its radius down a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to paint the wing here. Like so. Just fill it in. So there's our Protect map, if you like. And now I'm going to return to the Select tool, and I'm going to try and make a path selection through our painted area. So if I select an edge here and then hold Control Shift and go to the other side, you can see the area has been protected and our path is now actively finding a new route around this area. If you have used the protection tool to control path direction and you want to return the protected areas back to normal, this can be done on the right hand side. So back to our Protect tool, you go back to the parameters on the right hand side and you can just hit the reset button and it gets rid of the Protect map. While we're on the subject of path and loop selections, there is something else I'd like to show you quickly. When we're selecting paths, we get a nice preview before confirming a selection. We can actually swap out this functionality so it works with loops. So with the path, click, Control Shift, preview. Lovely. But if we go up to Select and go down here to Edge Tool Loop, now when we press Control and Select, we actually get loop previews. Like so. As you can see, we've still got our angle limit on, so I'm going to take that off. But yeah, we get a preview of our loops now. I'm going to return to the menu and change this back to normal. Okay, now I want to go over some of the semi-automatic selection tools. On the right at the top, we have a Select tab, so let's twirl this down. In this tab, we have a few icons. First, we have the orange cross. This just clears your selection, so if I make a selection there and click this, it just clears it. You can also clear the selection by just clicking in an empty space in the viewport. Next we have select borders. This selects the outer boundary of a UV island. I don't currently have any islands and therefore no boundaries. I might return to this after we've made some cuts. After that we have the select loops button. You may be wondering what the point of this is when you can just double click. Well, this tool you can select a bunch of single edges and then press this button. All selected edges will be looped. So if I select this edge and this edge, to add to selection I'm holding shift, by the way, and then I go up to my loop button up here and press that, it will loop all of those edges. Next up we have the ring selection, which is this button here. If I select an edge like this and hit this, you can see that we've got a ring selection of edges there. And just like the loop tool, it works with multiple edges. So if I selected this one and this one and this one, and then chose our ring selection, it will ring select all of them. The next button on our list is the select all button. You hit that and it will select everything. This can also be done by just pressing Ctrl A in the viewport. It will select everything. The next two buttons are grow and shrink selection. So if I select an edge like this and then press the grow button, it will just grow the selection of that edge. And similarly, if I press the shrink, it will shrink it down. Okay, for the next part I'm going to use a different model. So I've shut down RizomUV, gone back to Cinema 4D, and I'm going to export this carpet tuft model. So with the tuft selected, I hit the shortcut to the RizomUV export plugin. RizomUV should open back up again, and there's my carpet tuft model. I think now would be a good time to talk about the isolate tool very quickly. The isolate tool can be used to isolate objects, part of an object, or islands. One way which this can be done is by selecting the island select mode, which is here, selecting part of my object, like so, and then hitting the isolate button. That can be found here at the top. As you can see, the strand in this model has now been isolated. This makes it much easier to work when creating seams, especially with an object like this. But there is an easier way to use the isolate tool. I'm going to unselect my object, go back to the edge selection tool, and unhide everything by pressing this show button at the top. We don't actually have to select any part of this object to isolate it. We can just hover the mouse cursor over the desired part and hit the isolate shortcut key I. So I'm hovering the mouse there, I isolates. To unhide everything, we just need to move our cursor to an empty part of the viewport and press I again. So that's just a very brief look at the isolate tool. Now back to what I wanted to show you. If I wanted to unwrap all of these strands, it would take absolutely ages for me to pick through each of these strands and individually create seams for each one. Thankfully, RizomUV is equipped with the tools to make something like this relatively painless. First of all, I'm going to isolate one of these strands by hovering over it and pressing I. Now I'm going to create a seam. So in edge mode, I'm going to double click on this edge here and let's have a look. And as you can see, it's actually worked its way around the top as well. And I've got a feeling it's because if I go into my edge loop parameters, I've got geometric turned on still. So I'm going to ignore that for now. I'm going to turn that off and select another edge. And as you can see, it stops at the top and bottom. And then I'm going to go to the top here. I'm going to go to the top here and hold select to add to my selection and add them all the way around, apart from this bit here, because I want this to be like a lid so it can flap open using this as a hinge. I'm going to do the same at the bottom as well. In fact, we don't need that, so we can control select that. And as you can see, it's actually selected it up the other side. So maybe this would be a better choice. Let's just check the top. And has it come down the other side? No, it hasn't. So we can unselect that. We can do the same again, holding shift to add to the selection. And we'll leave that for a flap. Come down the bottom and we can add to this selection like so. And we're going to leave one for our hinge for our flap. Okay, let's unhide everything by pressing I in an empty space. I've lost my strand. Ah, there it is. Maybe you can see it there. Good. Okay, cool. So imagine if I had to do that for each of these strands. Not very productive. Well, over on the right hand side under select, so let's go back to the select and close this up. We have a button for clone across similar islands, which is this button here. So let's press this. As you can see, something's happened. It's actually transferred that selection to some of the other strands in the model. Unfortunately, not all of them. This is because RizomUV evaluates other parts of the model based on this threshold slider here on the right. Let's drop this slider down to a low value and press the button again. So let's just bring it all the way down. And I'm going to press that again. Just having a good old think. There we go. Now you can see our edge selection has been transferred to all parts of this model. So now we can press the cut button up here, or we can use its shortcut, which is C. You'll notice that the seams have turned orange, signifying that they are now cut and ready to be unfolded. Let's press the unfold button, which is up here, or its shortcut U. As you can see, our islands are all unfolded, but not only are they unfolded, they've been packed too, even though I didn't press the pack button, which is up here, and the shortcut is P. There's a good reason for this automatic packing. The rule is, if there are no other islands that are already flat, an automatic pack is performed when unfolding. While we're on the subject of packing, I'd like to show you something else very quickly. Let's unflatten our UVs so they are 3D again. We can do this by going to the top menu bar, unfold, and unflatten. So now these are unflattened. Now let's press the pack button or shortcut P. As you can see, it is possible to pack 3D objects in RizomUV, so that's something to keep in mind. And you can see that these are still 3D objects by coming up to this lock symbol for the lock rotation for the flat view. And now if we hold Alt and navigate around the viewport, we can see that these are still 3D objects. They've just been packed as close to the Z direction as possible. So lock that back. Anyway, let's reflatten our islands and continue. U to unfold, and they should be automatically packed again. Great. Okay, let's select one of these islands. I'm going to go into island mode and select one of these. You can see it's highlighted in blue there. And we're going to go over to the Align, Straighten, Flip and Fit tab. So let's close up the select one for now and drop this one down. Within this tab, we have a button called Clone Similar Island Coordinates, which is this one here. So I'm going to just press this button. As you can see, it appears that all of our islands bar one have disappeared. What's actually happened is that all of our islands have been stacked upon each other in the same location. So if I select this top island here and then hold space, I can then drag this off. And you can see that they've all been stacked on top of each other. So I'm just going to undo that by Control-Zing. This can be especially useful if you wanted all of these strands to be textured the same. This way all these islands can share the same part of a texture map. But there's a problem with this. If we wanted to keep these objects stacked and we were working on another part of this model, say there was some other parts, once we'd made cuts to the other part of our model and then pressed unfold for that island and then packed, so we can demonstrate that by packing again, shortcut P. All of these islands are separated out again, which may not be what you want. A better way of stacking our objects and keeping them stacked would be to go to Island Groups tab at the top. So if I go up here and open up Island Groups, we can select one of these objects and press Group Stack. Now our islands are stacked on top of one another, but they don't get separated when we press the pack button because they are in a group labelled stack. So I'm pressing the pack button. It's utilised as much of the UV space as possible, but all of our islands remain stacked. Okay, let's move on. First, let's remove our islands from this group. We can do this by selecting the group label at the bottom here and then pressing Ctrl G. That will remove our islands from the group. In fact, it completely gets rid of the group. Now let's pack these to lay flat again and zoom into one of our islands. Now I'm going to show you something very cool. We've all seen that if I select an edge and hit C, so if I do this and hit C, it makes a cut. Fine, but we can actually combine cutting and unfolding at the same time. So now that I've undone that, let's go to the Seams tab at the top, which is up here. We can enable the Live Unfold button, which you'll find here, Live View. Now when we make a selection and press C, we get an unfold operation too. Let's just undo that cut. I'll make a smaller one using path selection. So click there, path select, click there, and then hit the C key. And there you go. You get an unfold iteration as well. Let's undo that cut. This actually gets even better. I don't even have to make an edge selection to make cuts. I can just hover my cursor over the desired edge and press the C key. This is a lot like using a pair of scissors, and it's very, very intuitive. This actually works with welding as well. Up here you'll see that next to the cut button we have this button, which is the weld button. This is basically the opposite of cutting, and the shortcut for weld is W. So if I hover over one of our cut edges and press W, it will weld them back together. We also have a button called Live Optimize, which is up here next to the Live Unfold button. This tends to work better with larger islands. We're not going to cover that here because the Live Unfold button actually incorporates an optimize iteration as part of its functionality. Let's disable the Live Unfold button and put it to off for now. And let's talk about welding. Like I said, welding is the opposite of cutting. You can take already cut edges and weld them back together. So actually I'm going to turn on the Live Unfold and make our cuts again. There we go. And then I'll turn that off. Let's start by selecting one of our cut edges. Notice how not only is our selected edge is coloured blue here, but the corresponding edge it was cut from is also highlighted with a darker blue. This signifies the edge that will be connected back together when we perform a weld. I'm actually going to load another object to demonstrate this better. So let's close RizomUV for now. And I'm going to hide the carpet tough model. And I'm going to export this bracket model. And there we are. There's our bracket. Okay, as you can see, this object has already been cut, unfolded and packed. So let's talk more about welding. I'm going to double click on an edge. This one here. And we can see it's been highlighted, and up here you can see its corresponding edge in darker blue on this island over here. I'm going to switch to island select mode by pressing F4 and select both of these islands, click, shift click, and then by holding space I can drag these islands out of the way to make it easier to see what's happening. So I'm just going to drag them out the UV space. Oh, forgot to hold space then, there we go. Now we have our islands out of the way, I'm going to go back to edge mode and make sure our edges are selected, then press the weld button, which is located here at the top, or the shortcut W. You'll notice the island with the edges corresponding to our edge selection have been repositioned, rotated, and no longer has a cut at our selected seam. So if I just do that again, you can see that that's where our selected seam was, right on the edge there. And if I press W, the corresponding island comes to this island, is positioned, rotated, and is welded. So I'm just going to undo that. Inversely, if I select the edges on the other island, here, right at the edge there, oh, there we go, and press W, the other island comes to it. Okay, so let's undo that. Alright, let's move on and look at another weld tool. I'm going to set up a use case by making a cut through the middle of this island here. So I'm just going to select an edge, and I'm going to Control Shift to make a path and make a cut selection like that. Press the C key so it turns orange, and we've got our cut. As you can see, this has been misshapen. You're probably wondering why, and it's because we've still got this live unfold button on. So I'm just going to undo that, turn that off, and then make my cut again. There we go. Now, if I select a load of edges at the bottom here like this, and then press weld, W key, you can see that all islands associated with those edges are brought to my selection and welded. And to be honest, it looks like a bit of a mess. Let's back up and undo with Control Z. Okay, so this time I'm going to weld by pressing the Weld Self Island button. And you can find that up here. It's underneath the normal weld on the left. So let's just hit that. As you can see, the cut in the middle of the island has been welded, but the cuts that are outside of this island, or between islands, have been completely ignored. We can also do the opposite of this. So let's undo and get our cut back. So there we go, we've got our cut in the middle there. This time I'm going to select a bunch of edges and press the Weld Across Islands button, which is underneath the weld tool on the right, this one. As you can see, the cut within the island is still present, but the borders or cuts between islands have been welded. You'll also note that the connecting island's position has not been transformed. This will be changed so they are transformed in a future version of RizomUV. So let's undo that. It's important to know that these tools not only work in edge mode, but they also work in other modes too. For instance, if I go into island select mode, here, and select our island with the cut down the middle, then press Weld Self Islands, you can see that it welds the cut within the island, just like it did in edge mode selection. This is also true of cuts. Let's unflatten our object and weld our islands back together. So I'm going to go up to the top here, unfold, unflatten, so you can see that's there, and then I'm going to Control A in island mode and press the weld button. Okay, now I'm going to select the polygon selection tool and select some polygons on our objects. So I'm just going to select these ones up here, some arbitrary choice, and now I'll hit the cut shortcut C. As you can see, cuts have been made at the border of our polygon selection here. I'm going to undo that. Now that we're in polygon mode, you'll notice that we have a tab on the right called Magic Wand. So let's open that up. This is a really useful tool. So let's enable deviation mode. You can find that here. It's a little button. It says deviation, and we'll enable that. And you can see that the sliders that were greyed out before have now become active. Now if I hover my mouse over the model, you'll see that certain parts of it have been highlighted. This highlight is a preview of what will be selected if I left click. So there you go, I left click. So what determines what's being highlighted? The highlighted area is the deviation from the normal of the polygon under the mouse cursor. So this polygon's under my mouse cursor and it's looking for deviation from the normal direction of this polygon across all of these polygons. This deviation can be controlled with the slider on the right here. At lower values the selection area is small, and at higher values it's bigger. So if I put this down to something like this and then hover over, you can see that the selection is a lot smaller than it was before, especially on curved surfaces like this. On flat surfaces it's not going to matter too much because they don't deviate from each other because they're all on the same plane. But for this curved surface here, you can see that the selection's a lot smaller, and if I put this up, you can see that it's grabbing much more of a selection. And if we put it right up, you can actually go above this value as well. So where it says 45, I can put 100 in there, And now it will select, well, everything because it's too big, but let's go for 85, something like that. So you can see that it selected that entire curve there and stopped here. And we can select the entire top. It's important to note that this slider can actually be controlled not just by doing this, but it can be controlled in the viewport by holding down Shift and then using the mouse scroll wheel to actually change it. So when you're working in the viewport, this is actually quite handy because it means that I can go, oh yeah, I'm going to select that. Oh, I want that selection to be bigger. Let's put that up, and then it will grab all of that as well. And then I can make my selection. Let's turn off deviation by clicking this button, and let's choose edge. This method compares the normal of neighbouring polygons, and the threshold can be controlled by the max edge angle, which is here. So I can select this. Again, it's very similar to the deviation tool in some ways and not in others. But yes, we can actually. There we go. And as you can see, we had a lot more control with this curve with this one. And it seems to have selected the whole loop around there. By using these methods in the Magic Wand tool, the speed of unwrapping an object is greatly increased. So I'm just going to do a quick unwrap of this just to show you what I mean. I'm going to change my checkerboard mode on. Select this. I'm going to press C for cut, so you can see the cuts there. Then U for unfold. And then I'm going to press H to hide that. And then move on to the next one. So I can choose this now, press C to cut, unfold, and hide. C, unfold, hide, C, unfold, and hide. And I should imagine you get the picture by now. But I'm doing this bit sloppy because I don't want to be here all day. But you can see the benefits of this tool and how quickly this is actually helping me out. I think I made a mistake there. C U H C U H. Yeah. Okay. So I'm actually just gonna grab all of this and hide that stuff. Can I do that? Yeah, there we go. So I'm just left with what I've unwrapped. So we can select all of that, and then I'm going to pack it. So very, very quickly, I was able to, unwrap all of that stuff there. So the Magic Tool also has some options that allow us to finesse our selections too. To demonstrate this, I'm going to import yet another object. So let's close down RizomUV. And I'm going to hide this bracket. And we've got this scanned model of a nymph. So let's press that. Let's make sure that she's, good. So select the nymph. I'm going to use the exporter plugin. Import polygon mesh has some, it's got a bit of a dodgy topology, this one. You can see that there's a missing poly or something there, or it's it looks like a non-manifold edge actually, but we can ignore that for now. It's not too much of an issue. Okay, so I'm going to go into my polygon mode, and I'm going to use Magic Wand. I'm also going to use the edge mode, that's already on, and I'm going to use a max edge angle of, I don't know, 14, something like that, and make a selection near the base of the model. So if we come down here, you can see there's a lot of overflowing, cloth or something, and we've got this section here. So I'm just going to make a selection there. As you can see, a polygon selection has been made, but it's got some holes in it here. This is due to the max edge angle setting here. I could change that slider value, but it may change the reach of the rest of the selection. So if I affected that, then the reach of these parts here might change, or it might flow over into this bit here. So what I want to do is actually close these holes up, but not actually take the selection any further. Now I could go in and hold shift and just go through and do this, I suppose. But there is a better method. So let me just undo. We'll make our selection again. This is where the select isolated groups slider comes in. So if you look over here, we've got this select isolated groups. If I increase the value of this to around halfway, something like this, and try and make that same selection again, you can see that that selection now has the holes filled in. And there we go, there's the selection. So the selection is exactly the same, but this threshold is looked for the holes in it and gone, yeah, okay, I'm going to fill those in. Let's bring this slider back to 0 and have a look at the smoothing slider. This slider controls the threshold for smoothing the angles of noisy shapes. If I make a selection on the base, somewhere around here, and let's change our max edge angle, and I'm gonna, I don't know, let's make it 8.5 or something like that. Yeah, okay, cool. So I can actually adjust the reach of my selection by increasing the value of the smoothing slider. So this is my selection now, and if I crank up the smoothing slider, something like this, you can see that it reaches out a little bit more. And you can also see that we've got some holes here as well. So we can actually use a combination of smoothing and this select isolated groups. And you can see that where these holes are, they're now being filled in. It's probably quite evident now that using a combination of these sliders and tools will give you a total control over your selections. So I think that's going to wrap things up for this tutorial. Although I should state that there will be plenty more information about seam selection and cuts coming in future tutorials. Things like auto seams and the upgraded symmetry system were not included in this video because they're hefty subjects and probably deserve their own separate video. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.